Heading to a party and you want to bring the perfect gift for the host? Well, you're going to love this project. Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today, we're going to take this piece of hickory and I'm going to turn it into the perfect gift for your party host. Yeah, this is the time of the year where there's lots of parties. Both family and friends are having get-togethers, and it's nice to bring a gift for the host. But you're going to blow them away with this gift because they're not going to expect it. And the best part, it's super usable for them. And that's part of the secret of this bowl. And I'm going to explain this more as we're turning. So let's put it on the lathe and get started.
Okay, I'm going to mount this blank to the lathe using a faceplate. A faceplate is a really secure way of doing this. And I've got this battery-powered impact driver that is fantastic for driving these screws in. The best thing about it, it has the power to get through this dense wood, but it never slips. Its design doesn't allow it to slip, and it drives the screws in really well. I highly recommend getting one of these, especially if you've tried doing this with a regular drill. And drill will slip and you'll have all kinds of issues. So I'm going to mount this to the lathe and get started. Now this blank is about 9 inches in diameter and about 5 inches thick. That's about 23 centimeters wide by about 13 centimeters high. So it gives you an idea. Now that's going to be important, and I'll explain that in a little bit as we get going. Now I'm using my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge here. This is a great gouge to use for removing material quickly. Now I'm just roughing out this shape. I'm going to use this opportunity to shape the bowl and clean it up as well. So I could rough out or smooth the face of the bowl and the side, but it's easier just to do the two together by curving this cut around from the bottom to the side. And by doing this, as I get deeper into the cuts, I'm cleaning up the face and the side at the same time. All this material is going to need to be removed anyway. So we're going to change the speed of the lathe here a little bit. Now I'm not using tailstock support. It's not a bad idea to do that. If you can get the tailstock up there and support the blank, it's not a bad idea. I feel pretty comfortable with the faceplate, and I used all the screw holes on the faceplate. I feel that I've got a really secure connection there. So I'm going to keep roughing this out. You can see I'm taking pretty deep cuts here too. And this, I'm not concerned with the smoothness of the surface under the cut at this point. I'm just roughing material away. There you can see how I cleaned up that side very quickly. I have about half of the side of the bowl already cleaned up. The shape is pretty much being established, and the face is cleaned up as well. So this is a really nice technique to use, going around the curve of the bottom corner of the bowl to rough this out and smooth it up. Okay, I'm going to center my gouge on the tool rest. You want to make sure that the cutting point, or the area of the bowl gouge that's actually doing the cutting, is centered on the center line. And that's how you're going to determine the height of your tool rest. So I'm going to clean up the face here, and then I'm going to get ready to make the tenon and shoulder for this bowl. Now, what I'm doing is, this is designed to be a gift, and it's going to be a rather nice bowl. It's a size that I've found with trial and error through the years of turning bowls that works really good as a gift. Now, why is that? Well, the size is actually pretty particular. The design can be a variety of different things, but the size is really important. I've given away bowls. Now, of course, it depends on who you're giving to as well. There's people that just are amazed with bowls, and they're thrilled with any bowl that you can possibly bring to them. But I've found that most people, they will want to have a bowl that's relatively usable. And what's nice about this isn't super hard to turn, not difficult, and you don't need a big, huge special lathe. It is a rather large piece for a small lathe, but it's still manageable at 9 inches in diameter. What happens is, if you make a bowl that's too large, I've changed this camera angle so you can see the shape that I'm creating here. I've established that tenon and shoulder, And then I'm going to go through and start shaping from that shoulder. The shoulder will most likely be the foot of the bowl. So I'm going to start shaping that and more refining that shape. And that's why I wanted to show you this angle so you can see what's happening. And I have that indentation up at the top with the bark, but that's going to be part of the design. I'm going to make this a closed rim bowl, so that rim is going to be turned back here. And that's why I'm changing everything around so I can make a cut from the other side, which if you're trying to understand why I'd be cutting from that side, well, this is a supported grain cut from this direction, and I've got a video that explains this in great detail, this exact situation, so you may want to check that out. Now, back to the story here of the size. The size of this is actually really nice. A 9-inch bowl, I've found through experience, is what people really like and what they'll use on a regular basis. I've given bowls that are huge to people. I actually gave a really big bowl turned from a tree that was on my parents' property where I grew up. And it was really cool, but it was so big that they couldn't use it. I ended up taking it back. They kind of wanted something smaller. So I learned my lesson there that just because you can turn something really big doesn't mean everybody wants it. Yeah, they can appreciate it. Now I'm going to clean up this rim here using a scraping cut. Now, pay attention, I'm just using the lower wing to make a scraping cut. You want to be very delicate with this and just scrape away a little bit. And the reason I'm doing this, so I've established a top rim and I can see exactly where that top rim is. And there you can see I've got a clean surface all the way around that rim. So now I'm basically just connecting points. Now I'm using my 1/2-inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge, and if you're paying attention to the supported grain cut, you know that I'm actually making an unsupported cut here. But because I am doing this very lightly and I'm taking my time and the tool, it was just sharpened, the grain, the end grain most likely will not get ripped out. It's going to be very smooth here. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm undercutting this top rim because I'm going to create a beaded rim shape on top here. So I needed to establish that. There you can see the shape. And I've got this seam in the middle, but that's not a problem. I'm going to take care of that with the shear scrape, which I'm doing right now. The shear scrape is used to refine all of these different rough areas and make them nice and smooth and conform with one another. So if you give away a bowl that's too big to somebody that doesn't have space or can't really use it, it's not really that great of a gift. And then on the other hand, if you give something that's so small that it can only be used for certain things, it's also, again, it's not very usable. It might be a nice decorative piece to put on a counter or something. But I've found that this size, around 8 to 10 inches, now this is a 9-inch diameter, and again, that's about 23 centimeters across the top of the bowl. This is a really good size for a variety of reasons. It's very functional, essentially. This is super functional for the kitchen. You could put fruit or produce in it. It could be sitting on the counter and be a nice display piece. It could just be sitting on a table just as a decorative piece as well. The other thing that I like about this particular bowl is the closed rim. You saw how that top rim is narrower than the widest point of the bowl. That's considered a closed rim. Now I've established this base corner from where the foot will be and the bottom curve of the bowl. And that's really important to use. The shear scrape is just a delicate little technique to refine this surface. It works really, really well. So the closed rimmed aspect of this bowl is really helpful for keeping things inside the bowl. I know this sounds crazy, but open bowls, or in other words, if you think of the outer shape of the bowl as being like the letter U, they are okay. But if you use, for instance, if you use this bowl for popcorn, what happens with a bowl that's not closed rim is every time you grab a little bit of popcorn, you inevitably knock some of the popcorn out of the side of the bowl. With the closed rim, everything seems to stay inside the bowl really well. It's a weird little physics thing, but just that little bit of closed rim. Now this closed rim is actually a little more than I usually do. Some of the closed rims, they don't have to be much. It's essentially, technically, it just means the rim is just a little bit narrower than the widest point. Here with this profile view, you can see that the rim is actually quite a bit narrower than the apex or the highest width of this bowl. But just that little bit of inside curve on that rim really helps to keep everything in the bowl. It's really odd. Well, and you'll see that when I'm coring out or cleaning out the interior of the bowl, the shavings won't leave the bowl. They get trapped in there very easily. Now I'm going to use my spindle detail gouge to define this edge between the side of the bowl and the rim. And then I'm going to switch over here in a second to my 1/2 inch bowl gouge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that lower wing again and just lightly use a scraping cut here to start shaping this curve. Now, I've initially shaped this rim a little larger, or quite a bit larger than it will be when I'm done. And the reason for that is I can design this. Just because I'm making these little cuts here and shaping this doesn't mean I'm focused on just that area. I'm looking up at the top of the bowl and I'm looking at the overall shape of this bowl and I'm trying to decide how I want this rim exactly to appear. And I know I want it to be beaded or curved, and I want it to be smaller because I don't want it to be this big clunky rim up there. So I can keep shaping that, but I'm watching the overall shape of the bowl as I'm doing it. That's looking really good. I'm really happy with that. So now I'm going to use the spindle detail gouge to make the shape for the dovetailed tenon here so that it matches the dovetail on my 4-jaw chuck. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is kind of curious. If I wasn't using the tailstock before, why would I bring the tailstock up now? And the answer to this will be coming up a little bit later. But that's actually a really important thing. And if you skip that and you take the faceplate off, you're going to wish you didn't skip that because it will be a little bit tricky later. So I'm going to take the faceplate off. Again, the impact driver is fantastic for pulling these screws out. It never slips. As a matter of fact, I bought a pack of these wood screws, really nice stainless steel wood screws. I think there was 25 or maybe 30 screws in the pack. And I've never gone through all of the screws. Occasionally, I'll reach down in the bottom of that little jar and I will pull out a screw that's brand new because I've never gotten down to it. I keep reusing these screws over and over again. I never had that situation with the standard head screws. I would strip out the screws so quickly, I would go through a box of screws in no time. And that doesn't happen with the impact driver. And also the square bits are actually really handy, and there's a name for that, and I'm trying to remember. And I know that it was done by a Canadian engineer or designer. I want to say it's like a Stewart bit or something like that. Let me know in the comments if you know the name of the square driver bit that you saw there with the faceplate. Okay, so I'm using my 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge to smooth out the surface and clear some of this material away. Now I'm going to switch over to my 1/2 inch bowl gouge and start removing some of this shape around the rim. Again, I want to refine this rim, but I have to be very careful because I have to look at the overall shape and size of the rim, but I also have to have it match the inside wall of the bowl. So I'm going to use the same scraping cut here. Just want to go very lightly, take your time, and I'm only using that lower wing to shape this. And I'm creating a curve from the inside of the bowl that matches that bead that I started up on the top of the bowl or the outside of the bowl. And then I'm going to merge them together here. Now, some of this can be refined with the final sanding as well, but I really want to get this shape nailed down using the bowl gouge first. And it's feeling a little clunky. I'm probably going to reduce it just a little bit more. Don't want it to be too wide. Now, here you can see I'm clearing away the material, but I need to get ready to do the inside portion of that wall. And just that little bit of an angle on a closed rim bowl is going to really require me to reach around. I have to get pretty far around across the lathe to get into that particular location. So I'm just removing material. I don't have the angle quite right yet to get in there, but it's getting closer. I've got enough material removed that I can get in there and start getting into that. Here you can see how far I'm reaching across the lathe. I need to reach almost completely across. The bowl gouge is almost perpendicular to the lathe bed when I'm making this inside rim cut, but that's what's required for that top edge. And again, like all of the other bowls, what I'm doing is I'm taking the bevel of the bowl gouge and I'm making that bevel parallel or matching, mirroring the outside shape of the bowl. Because essentially what I'm doing is I'm matching the interior of the bowl to the outside. And I'm going to stop frequently and check that wall thickness. It's getting close to what I would like. And I'm going to remove some of this material in the center of the bowl, so I can continue working down. Now here, you can see the shaving is starting to build up. Because this is a closed rim bowl, the shavings will not leave that bowl. And I'm at probably 800 RPMs here. And they're not, some are coming out, but not all of them. The majority of them are going to stay inside that bowl. And that's kind of the neat feature of a closed rim bowl. So what I was getting at, if you're going to give a gift, it's great to give a gift that's really usable and has a variety of different uses. And I've found that this size is great. And the closed rimmed aspect, now you don't have to make a fancy beaded rim if you don't want to, but just a little bit of a closed rim is kind of a nice design touch, but it's also very functional. And this is going to be a really nice bowl that if somebody receives it, they're going to be able to use it in pretty much any way they want. It can be used for a whole variety of different purposes. And like I said, I found that if you get into a really big bowl, people like to look at those, but they really can't be used for a lot. And then if you get into something really small, it might be used for something. It's usually used for holding something. And usually it's more of a display thing. It's not really a very functional piece. So this size overall, I think if you're going to give a gift and it's something that's reasonable for you to turn, you don't want something that's going to take you forever to turn and then you kind of feel like, I don't know if I want to give this away. So this is a really nice one. And if you really practice this a bunch, you can make a couple of these in a weekend very easily. And if you go to a couple dinner parties, you can bring them and impress your host, and they have something really nice, and it's just a nice thing to do. So I'm going to keep working down this interior wall and match that wall thickness all the way down. And I'm switching between my 5/8 inch gouge, which I'm using right now to rough this material, because again, I'm not trying to make finished surfaces here. I'm just removing material. Look at those shavings building up, by the way, with that closed rim. The shavings aren't leaving. And you do need to stop periodically and clear those out because they will interfere with the bowl gouge as you're cutting. It's incredible just how that works. So you can imagine this filled with popcorn. It's the same concept. You can run around with it, and everything stays in there really well. Okay, so we'll get those out of the way, and I'll continue turning through here. Now I'm roughing this out with the 5/8 inch 55-degree bevel swept-back bowl gouge, because this gives me a little bit extra support here. If you can see, I'm reaching over the tool rest quite a ways, and I don't have quite as much control as I would like. You really want that tool rest to be close to the cutting tip so you've got a lot of control over the tool. At this point, it's starting to become a lever, and the bowl is kind of fighting me here. I'm going to sharpen my gouges before I go any farther. Now, I've sharpened probably 3 or 4 times during this turning. And you basically need to turn whenever your tool is not performing, or if you notice there's a decrease in the performance. And that can be tricky to notice over time sometimes. But I know this is hickory, this is a harder wood, this is going to start dulling my tool. Also, the tool tip will get very hot sometimes. That's a good indication that it's dulling or it's working really hard, or you're pushing into the wood. You don't really want to be pushing into the wood. Now, sharpening, this is all in real time. I have not cut anything. It's very quick, doesn't need to take long. So if you need to learn how to sharpen your tools, I've got a course all about tool sharpening that'll show you exactly what you need to do, and I show you how to shape tools. If you would like to use this 55-degree bevel swept back bowl gouge that you see here that you can't find anywhere in stores, well, guess what? Buy a regular bowl gouge and you can shape it just like this. And in my tool sharpening course, I show you how to shape that. So check that out. Okay, so now I'm going to make some finishing cuts here. I've switched to my 1/2-inch bowl gouge, which makes a really nice light finishing cut. But you can see that I'm reaching way over the tool rest and I'm picking up vibration with this, and I'm really not happy with that. So vibrations means that you're going to have an unsmooth surface. So instead, I'm going to switch back to my 5/8-inch bowl gouge, and I'm going to use that to finish this bowl out. It's incredible, but the 1/8-inch difference is enough to make this a lot more stable over the tool rest when you have to extend like that. Now, I'm still getting a little bit of vibration, so I'm thinking I'm going to change my tool rest. I have a couple different tool rests, and I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna get this material out of the way so I can get down to pretty much my final passes here, but I'm gonna rough out this section. Now you want to be careful not to go quick over that center, because you can pull out fibers that go deep down. Okay, it's looking good. The shape's good, but it's a little rough in the bottom. I'm going to switch this tool rest. I have a J or an L-shaped tool rest. I'll put links to this and all the tools that I use in the description for this video, so you might want to check those out. But this is nice because I can get in a little bit deeper and I can make this pass to really clean up everything and get a nice smooth surface across the bottom of this. Just want to take your time, especially with the last finishing passes. You want to make sure your tool's sharp and just make light passes. All right, that's looking really good. So I'm going to go through sanding. Now I'm sanding starting at 120 grit, then I'll go to 180, then I go to 240, and then I go to 320. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time here. I'm going to sand the interior and the exterior, and then I'm going to sand the bottom, inside bottom by hand with the sander, but with the lathe off, like you're seeing right here. Now, you really need to remember that each of these grits becomes less aggressive. And shaping the beaded portion of this, I really won't do much of that with the 120 grit. Now I also have this tension crack on the side. Now this is because this portion was closer to the pith area or the center area of the tree. And this is a really simple technique. You can fill that with glue and quickly sand it. I cover that in another video. I've got a video all about cracks and how to deal with those. You might want to check that out. But essentially, I'm going to fill that. I'm not worried about this expanding. The tension that created this little crack was from a different area of this particular log, so I'm not too concerned with that. And this little crack will pretty much disappear. So I'm going to continue sanding the exterior, interior. And what I was mentioning is I'm not going to do any sanding of that beaded portion until I get down to 180 grit, which is what I'm at right now. If I do this with 120, it's a little too aggressive and it can shape that beaded area very quickly. So here you can see I'm just going to take my time and I'm going to roll over that beaded section to make it nice and rounded. And I'm really happy with this. This is looking fantastic. So I'm going to reverse this and get this mounted to the jam chuck so that I can take the foot or the tenon off and turn that into the foot. Now this jam chuck has been sitting around, is deformed a little bit. It's got a little wobble to it. So I'm just simply going to turn the face of this to true that back up. And put a piece of foam padding in there, put that back over the jam chuck. And now here is why we made that little mark before. Now we can line this up and it's perfectly centered. If I didn't make that mark right before I ended earlier, this thing would wobble and it's like almost impossible to find that center. So I'm going to remove the tenon and I'm going to get ready to start shaping the foot of this. Basically just making push cuts here to remove this area. And then I'm going to take this shoulder down just a little bit. It doesn't need to be quite this high, so I'm going to remove some material and make this a little bit narrower. I think my tailstock came loose. And I didn't tighten that up. It seemed like it was snug. Okay, well, it seems centered, so let me see if I can continue here. I'm going to bring the back to that center point. Oh, did you see that? It's flexing.
Okay, yeah, that just happened. Yeah. This bowl is not going to be a bowl, unfortunately. So what happened? My first thought was that the tailstock had loosened up, which caused this to jump off the jam chuck. Well, guess what? It wasn't that at all. I turned this too thin, or rather, I turned the interior too deep, and I didn't realize it. What I should have done is I should have used calipers to measure the wall thickness all the way down into the bottom of this bowl. Then I would have known that this was a little deeper, and I had the material here, which is really frustrating because I had that longer shoulder and I had the tenon there, so I could have fixed it if I had realized it was deeper. So it's my fault for not measuring the depth of this bowl and understanding the wall thickness. So what happened was it got really thin here and it flexed just enough for it to come loose from the tailstock. It didn't go through, but you can feel the little bump in there and it's real thin right there. Had I turned it just a little bit more, it definitely would have come apart and I would have created a funnel. When you make the inside bigger and deeper than the shape of the outside, you make a funnel. We've all done it. I almost did another one today, but I wanted to share this whole video with you guys to let you understand that it can happen to anyone. And if it happens to you, don't get discouraged. Go grab another chunk of wood, throw it on the lathe, which I'm going to need to do if I'm going to bring a gift to this party we're going to, and just turn again. You'll figure it out. And we learn from these mistakes. That's the best part, is I'm sharing this mistake with you guys so that you learn not to make this. So what I really need to do is measure that, how deep. I can use calipers on the side all the way around this. My hand can't reach it. So I was thinking everything was fine. But what I was doing is I was spending extra time making that interior nice and smooth, and I was removing extra material on the inside, and I just made that inside really deep. If I had realized it, I could have made the foot just a little bit taller and everything would have been fine. Now, I could fix this. You could cut this out and insert another piece of wood. I don't like doing that. I could sand this down, but it's going to be really thin in the bottom, and I don't want to give that as a gift to somebody to have a really thin bottom in there. It's got a nice solidness to it, and all of a sudden you get this little clinking sound at the bottom. Nah, that's no good either. So this is going to get chucked. Now, it turned out really nice. I'm very happy with it. The rim is really cool. I think everything looks really good on this, and it's such a shame, but yeah, this is going to get chucked. What can you do, huh? That's just life. Things happen. I hope you've liked this video, and I hope you've liked the fact that I've actually shared this with you guys. So if you did like this video, do me a huge favor and click that like button. Also, be sure to subscribe if you're not already subscribing. And leave me a comment. Have you ever made the inside bigger than the outside of your bowl? Yeah, it happens to all of us. Leave me a comment and let me know about your experience. All right. Be sure to check out my website, turnofwoodbowl.com. Over there, I've got everything you need to know about turning beautiful bowls that aren't funnels. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, happy turning.